everybody. Welcome to the second Revenue Management Roundtable of 2025. We're going to give people a couple minutes to kind of flow in, and in the meantime, let us know in the chat where you're coming from. We'd love to hear, what the weather's like where you are. We're going to talk about the weather for a minute while we're making small talk. Bryant, you started us off. How's the weather?
Weather's nice here. It's upper 60s, low 70s. So yeah, it's great.
That sounds
That's
nice.
Gulf Shores, Orange Beach area.
Yeah, no humidity yet?
No, I'm gonna knock on wood on that because it's gonna come fast and furious, and it's just gonna all of a sudden be feeling like it's 90 degrees at 6 in the morning, like it does for about half the year down here, and that is not that fun. So
Death.
take advantage of this couple of weeks of good weather we get where it's real nice, and hope it doesn't get too hot too fast.
Yeah. What about the rest of you guys? Rebecca, you're in Mobile, right?
Let's see. No, I'm just down the street from Brian.
Oh.
So I'm in Gulf Shores. Like, we're literally neighbors. No, I'm just
Oh,
kidding.
for some reason I thought you were in Mobile.
No.
Josh, how are you
Yeah,
doing? How are things
here
where
in
you are?
here in Port Aransas, Texas, it is in the 60s, mid 60s right now, but it's been up and down with the in the evenings. So if you got a 20-mile-an-hour north wind, it feels like it's in the 50s in the evenings. But I think for the most part, it's been a pretty warm spring break, unlike last year where we had a kind of a mini freeze towards the end of it. But it's beautiful here.
Awesome. Awesome. Heather, how are things where you are? Where are you coming from?
Over here on the Forgotten Coast, we've had a little bit of temperamental weather. It doesn't really want to decide if it wants to be hot or cold, so it changes daily. But I think we're starting to get towards the warm part of the season. But we had some snow, which nobody in Florida knew how to act when that happened. So it was a fun little moment for us. But overall, it's beautiful now.
Awesome. And I'm up in Spokane, Washington, where it's a nice 44, which to me feels very warm. We're having our
Hmm.
false spring where it seems like it's spring, but then it's going to start snowing again for another month, probably. Okay, cool. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. If you haven't attended a revenue management roundtable before, we do post all of these on our YouTube. So if you're kind of listening and wanted to come back to something somebody said, that will be posted on our YouTube. If you want to share the recording with someone that you think should really listen to it, that'd be great. We have a really awesome panel of revenue managers here to talk about kind of the basics, what's happened in the last quarter, what's going on right now, and what we're planning for in the next quarter. My name is John DeRelay. I'm the head of revenue management education at Wheelhouse. Been a revenue manager for a long time. Really excited to chat with everyone here. Rebecca, why don't you start us off with the introductions?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Rebecca Ballart with Rev and Research. We are a revenue management consultant firm. We've got clients all across the world, so we're in a lot of different markets. Everyone from property managers from, 20 properties all the way up to 1,000. So pretty interesting perspective that myself and our team gets.
Awesome. And Josh?
I am Joshua Murphy. I'm with Life in Paradise Vacation Rentals Revenue Manager. We manage 694 lovely units here on the Gulf Coast. And yeah.
Perfect. Heather?
My name's Heather Hare. I'm with Cape and Coast Premier Properties. We're on the Forgotten Coast, which is from Mexico Beach to St. George Island, if anybody knows where that's at. We manage 280 luxury properties.
Perfect. And Bryant?
I'm Bryant Loy. I work with Brett Robinson Vacation Rentals, kind of work with the marketing and revenue management teams, and distribution and all that fun stuff too. But we have about 1,775 units, primarily condo inventory in Gulf Shores and Orange Beach, Alabama. And actually, we just got into Perdido Key a couple months ago and have a few there now too. So
Awesome. Well, we got a really good panel. Pretty excited. I don't know if anyone caught the last revenue management roundtable, but pretty interesting. That last revenue management roundtable, the revenue managers really were looking at January and February and kind of Q4 and thinking that this year was going to be a year marked by a lot more stability. Now we've got a good panel here and we'll kind of ask how they feel about that. But we're really going to just start out by talking about how the recent kind of month or quarter has been going, what you guys have been seeing, looking at, and how you kind of been acting from a revenue management perspective. Bryant, do you want to kind of start us out?
Yeah, not great here recently, to be honest. So, we came into the year with a kind of, we'll call it a cautiously optimistic approach to 2025, kind of expecting to be maybe a little lower starting base rate this year than the last couple of years to kind of try to start and get that, occupancy base up early and see if we had some room to make some adjustments as time went on. For winter, we had a pretty cold winter down here overall. We had, this weird snow thing that we got, about 6-7 inches of snow that we're not used to here. And it was just kind of a unique, kind of chilly, cold winter. So the winter didn't quite get the same last minute kind of short-term business that we typically get. But for the spring, we kind of saw those trends and went ahead and dropped rates and, well, kept dropping them and keep dropping them because it's not working to get the inventory picked up. And I know that it's not just the Gulf Shores and Orange Beach market where we're looking at what's going on with the Northwest Florida markets, and we're kind of seeing similar trends there. So where we're at now is being very competitive, not just on rates, but also making adjustments to where we can drop some fees potentially to kind of take some of that burden off the owner and take a little bit on ourselves. That's kind of where we're at right now. And it's, we had aggressive marketing pretty early with big promotional discounts. We typically don't go over 15 on discounts. We went to 20 this year pretty early to try to hit that and hit the marketing side of it as well. Didn't see a great deal of traction on that. So we're just kind of going to more of a, let's just hit the rates because those are going everywhere. They're going to Vrbo, they're going to Airbnb, they're booking.com, anywhere you can find us. So we're definitely on a very inventory, get it sold, heads in beds type strategy here for the next through the end of May or through the end of April, really. So
awesome. We have an opportunity to talk a lot, and I know that your team really recognized some weakness early on. How early did you really, notice that? What is some of the data you looked at to see that? Because
yeah,
I think that'd be really helpful for people.
Yeah, a couple things that we did. So going back to how early, Black Friday, Cyber Monday is our first kind of blast of bookings that we get for the next year, because we're a small inventory, so we don't get a ton of early bookings for any of our next year. The year before, we don't get a ton of rebookings and things like that. So when we do our Black Friday, Cyber Monday, what we dug into is we looked at the search data. Where were people looking on our website? Where were they booking on our website? Where did we see good conversion rates, bad conversion rates, and just kind of get an idea of where was their strength and where was their not strength. And so we quickly realized that the 2 weeks that we had kind of targeted for real good spring breaks were not there. And so we made some adjustments back then to come down and get more realistic then. There's actually a couple weeks in the summer that didn't have a great deal of pickup there, but we didn't overreact to that just because that's kind of a different booking pattern for us. So like we can be a little more delayed in making a rapid adjustment on something like that. But with the spring stuff, we went ahead and hit that. And Black Friday, Cyber Monday, after we ran a couple more flash sales around the holidays, we dropped it a little bit further just because it still wasn't quite moving the way we wanted it to. And then it's just been a continual kind of, let's make sure we're priced at a very competitive rate. And again, making sure the fees are not taking you too far above, total price once it's all said and done too.
Awesome. Yeah. I know you've got some really good access to data. I don't know if you have time to tell everyone, so I would recommend people buy a unit in one of his buildings so he can tell you from an owner perspective. Heather, do you want to tell us a little bit about what's been going on recently in your portfolio?
Yeah, so when we look at for the winter timeframe, we definitely get some snowbirds from Canada, and I feel like the conversion from Canada to U.S. dollar really kind of had an effect on those snowbirds coming down. Plus, we did have snow, so they might have went further South Florida. It wasn't that big of a delta though, so we didn't really panic too much on winter. We kind of identified spring break moving typically 3 solid weeks in March for our demographic in our area, which is the Atlanta, Marietta, kind of area, moved into April. So right now our March looks terrible, but our April looks like it's killing it, and it's really just because 2 of those major spring break weeks moved with Easter coming later in the year, kind of had that effect. But spring break in general, it just like everybody else is seeing, is down. It's down market wide and it's down year over year for us. Because we are a luxury brand, and we've got the big houses, so we've got, mostly Gulf fronts, mostly, 5 bedrooms and up. We kind of lead with price before we did occupancy, but I was pulling back price way sooner than I had normally done. So my primary booking season, that was going to be like November and December. I was pulling back pricing like beginning of December, and have continued up until today, to continue to try to get somebody to look at it. But at a certain point, houses so big, you really just have to be careful about how low you go, because then you get a whole different socioeconomic client, which for the luxury homeowner people out there, it's not going to work out really well. So we're struggling, just like even with the highest demand properties on spring break. I am noticing though, and I don't know if it's, I can't say it for sure, but it kind of looks like the people who you normally booked with us for spring break are actually booking fall, way ahead of pace. So I don't know if that demographic is like, well, we're not going to take 3 vacations this year. Maybe we're only going to take 2. We want to go when it's for sure warm. I'm not sure what the behavior is yet, but I do think that we're going to see a higher fall performance than we did previous year based on what I'm seeing right now.
That's interesting. When you say those same people, are you looking more at like the broader demographic where you're seeing fall pickup, or are you looking at
I'm
like
looking at
your return guests?
my return guests.
Interesting.
And I'm also, so like in the last 30 days, I went from 10.3 adjusted paid occupancy to 27% paid occupancy for the fall time period. So huge pickup. And I normally don't see that pickup until like July. So we've got a lot of advanced bookings on fall, which is why I'm thinking maybe people missed coming down in spring, right? And they're like, well, let's make sure we grab it in fall. So if you're in this area, Southeast, I would look at your fall and see if there's a way to kind of pick up the difference that you lost on spring.
And just one quick follow-up on that. That's kind of two-part. One is, have you adjusted fall prices because of what's going on in the spring? And also, how do you set your fall pricing? Because I know some people keep like really high premiums, so they might not be seeing that. Like, how do you establish your fall pricing in general?
So fall pricing, all of my pricing in general is a percentage of summer, right? So you've got your summer, which is going to be your absolute highest rate, or whatever, insert peak season here, right? Fall is typically somewhere between 70% of the summer rate, varied on the product, right? But let's just say 70%. And I will increase price if for that fall chunk of time, so like from August 2nd to October 19th, if they have an occupancy of 50%, I'm increasing rates. So it really depends by house, by occupancy, by season. Because if it's booking fast, that tells us we're leaving money on the table, right? So my process is very like by unit process. You can't do that on all of them because some of them might not be, might have 0 on the books. If you raise it too high, you might kill it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. Well, thank you, Heather. Josh, do you want to let us know what's going on in Texas?
Yeah. So kind of similar to what Bryant followed up on, we went into the year pretty optimistic, expecting to see more of the same as last year, given how it ended up being. We do a lot of snowbirds as well, mainly Minnesota, Wisconsin. We get some Canadians, but it was a slower winter Texan season overall. We were actually the same, but the whole market was down, and the only reason we grew a little bit was because of just the increase in inventory that we saw. So we ended up paring the same as what we did last year. Overall, the market was down, winter Texans overall. But a curious thing, and kind of what I've noticed the past few days especially, is how booking windows have just absolutely shrunk. For us, we're a drive-to market. We don't get a lot of international travel. And our spring break last year was 1 week. This year they spread it up into 2 weeks. And so you have different school districts taking their vacations differently. And obviously with the increase in inventory, you're spreading it across. So you're spreading it across an extra week. So it's affecting people with different economic groups like San Antonio, they take the first week, they're a little more price conscious. Rates were a little lower for that week, and if you didn't get them lower, you just didn't book. But we've seen a huge last minute demand for spring break. It's down quite a bit. I think 20% overall is what it was. But the crossover weekend ended up being the same as last year. But rates are coming down a lot. We've kind of played a we typically hold rates a little higher than most people in our market just to see what we can get and then just dump them at the last minute. So whether that artificially makes our booking window a lot shorter, I don't know, but based on the market and kind of the data that we've seen, it seems like just everybody's waiting till the last minute to make their bookings. But the weird thing is for spring and then obviously summer, we're actually pacing a little bit ahead of where we were before. So similar to what Heather said, their fall is pacing a little bit better than their spring break. We're pacing a lot better for our summer and our spring for whatever that's worth. But we're not doing as many promotions as we did last year. It's more of a balance between rates and then obviously fees. We're doing some similar things as Brian mentioned with making sure fees are balanced properly, getting rid of junk fees, restructuring that side of it. So on the guest side and the owner side, they're not feeling it as much because, you know, with these, especially the smaller inventory, if you get rates too low and your fees are, you know, double what they're making in rent, the owner kind of gets a little questionable on what you're doing in your strategy. But what I'll tell a lot of people too is if you have owners who are worried about the year, who are worried about their units filling up, and if they're an owner that maybe likes to use it a lot, tell them to hold off till the last minute if they can. Tell them to wait till the very end and see what happens, especially if you're in a beach market. Just see what you can get because it seems like Airbnb is making a comeback. Vrbo's continuing to tank a little bit. And I think people are getting more smarter and finding people direct nowadays too.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've been looking at a lot of market data as part of kind of like a series on the Wheelhouse YouTube, and something I noticed around about a lot of the Texas markets is their booking windows are just much shorter than some of these areas on the other parts of the Gulf. Which in my opinion makes it really hard to make a decision about if the market's down. When I was looking at like Port Aransas and Corpus Christi and stuff, like instead of seeing that data as early as like November or seeing it in like right at the beginning of January, it really didn't become evident that there was a lag in booking pace until like end of January to mid-February, which is super duper short. So like
Yeah.
how are you guys judging that decision? When are you knowing when to make a change? And like you said, you obviously, because you have short booking windows, are more inclined to hold the rate than some of, I think what Bryant or Heather have said. So I'm curious just what you're looking at and how you know, like, what is the flashing red signal for you?
Really, our flashing red signal is it's kind of twofold. Whenever owners start calling a little bit more, we start to make huge adjustments. Like most everyone does, as soon as they start screaming, then we start pulling stuff back. But really, we've been through a couple spring breaks like this to know that it's always going to be a last minute thing, more or less. It's just more so this year for some reason. Again, whether that's artificial or not, I don't know. But usually leading up 2 weeks to a week before spring break, we really start hammering and dumping them off. We kind of know once we get to within 2 weeks, then we got to start taking a look at properties. And then that's when we start picking through, okay, what are our 3 bedrooms doing? How are condos doing? We start seeing where the different unit groups are pacing because our inventory is very mixed. We have a lot of condos. We're probably 50% condos. The other 50% is going to be homes anywhere from 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, all the way up to 10 bedrooms. And so we just kind of pick those apart, see, and just we don't move the whole inventory right away. We just start moving different groups, seeing what paces ahead, and then everything just falls into place, it seems like.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Rebecca, you want to talk to us a little bit about, I
Sure.
mean, no specific spot, you tell us.
Yeah, no, I think overall, there's definitely been some markets that have surprised me. For spring break, like everyone, we were kind of watching it early. I think the biggest thing is that time goes by so fast that we kind of forget about what our booking patterns were and things last year. So when we were kind of beginning of the year back in January, looking at some of these markets going, okay, where were we last year at this point? What did we see change happen? Did we artificially help that because we got rates down, or we pulled the lever of length of stay? Like, those notes became so important. So some of our clients in some of the beach markets and stuff that we did that early have seen a pretty good pickup and pace through that. Now, some of our other maybe newer clients or things that wanted to kind of gamble with the spring break, it's a little bit more like roll up your sleeves and kind of see what we can make happen here, just because it's a little bit tougher. It's interesting too when you have all these different markets across the US, you see trends that, have happened in one market and are kind of making their way to another. A good example of that would be the Panhandle for spring break has been rough, the last couple of years. That's been something we all can agree on. And we're seeing that swing all the way over to Hilton Head now. Those markets did not feel this kind of anguish, I guess you could call it. And so they're kind of a little bit spinning because it's 2025, like we're post-COVID, everything should be normalized, and they're kind of seeing and feeling some things that they've never felt before. But we see the data and it mimics the same patterns that we've seen in other beach markets. So it's interesting to kind of see, to go, is this a traveler issue? Is something changing? Is your demographic of guests coming changing? Is your channel markup changing? So there's a lot of interesting things kind of happening in that market that's leaving a lot of people kind of spinning. And then you have, like, I'll just touch on it briefly. Like, you've got the ski market that has had a phenomenal year compared to last year because they have way more snow. But I do think that Heather mentioned this, is the change of Easter and spring break is really putting a lot of pressure on people, to the point where I'm almost telling all of my clients to look at March and April together, because you see those same patterns. One could be down in one month but up in the other, and it's like, oh, averaged out, I'm right where I should be. So I'd like to put in a request to not change Easter. So if, John, you could make that happen, that we just kind of all agree on a day and keep Easter the same all the time, that would be really great for all of us revenue managers that remember where Easter is.
Do you, this is something I've been wondering about looking at some of the data, because you obviously can see some of this boost around Easter and April, but do you think the late Easter can command as strong of a rate position as is like the ones that hit in March? Do you think that Easter this year is going to be as strong from an ADR position as Easter last year? And anyone can chime in here too, but start with Rebecca.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think a little bit like the beach markets, it's later, so it's warmer. I mean, I live here at the beach. Sometimes early March is not warm. Like, I'm not getting in that water. But if you live in the Midwest, it's warm, and those kids get in it. I'm like, there's no way. But 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, when the temperature has been warm, people are more apt to, the kids are out of school or have a long weekend. You may not be getting that week booking for spring break, but you might get a 5 or 6, 5-night stay. So I don't know. Honestly, the month that's surprising me the most in a lot of my markets is May. May is the month that I think we're kind of sleeping on, and it's pacing strong for quite a few of my clients that I'm very happy about, because we need to look at some good stuff coming. So I'm looking forward to May. I'm ready to be over with March and April.
I've looked at almost every major market across the Gulf and up some into the Carolina coast and down Texas, and both Heather bringing up fall, you bringing up May, I think there's something really interesting there, which is these are months where the expectations aren't already high. So people aren't putting those expectations into the rate plan and allowing them to pace, they're basically letting the consumer set the pace for them. And I think pretty consistently across the spring in these markets, people are just expecting too much. There's always a huge mismatch between posted rates and actuals. And this extends into April a little. I understand that the dates are going to move around. But, you know, when I look at these like market averages for rate, it's like the second week of March is kind of like where they put the April and May rate. And it's like, but the RevPAR is way lower. And I just really think people need to like, people are just expecting too much. And the fall is really where it's becoming evident. People don't have that expectation. And even like, it's been like, this is like year 2 now, maybe even into year 3, where fall is consistently overperforming because people are responding to the consumer rather than letting the consumer go to their website and decide it's too expensive. Feel free to comment on that. I did want to ask you guys a question before we move on to kind of like what's going on now and into the future. But how do you guys do your spring break planning? You guys have really complex spring breaks in a lot of your markets. I'm just curious if you'd tell us a little bit about your process and how you guys think about it. And because, you know, it is complex. So why don't we start with Heather on this one, and then we'll go around.
Yeah, so what I do is I go into Key Data plug, if you're not using it, and I pull what zip codes are coming during spring break historically. And I usually do the last couple of years. And I throw those zip codes into ChatGPT and I get the school calendars. So identifying the top 20% who are coming during that time frame and their school calendars has helped me identify the peak weeks ahead of the booking, right? So you price those weeks higher ahead of that kind of booking cycle. We found this year that 4/6, I love he's taking notes. 4/6 historically was a terribly dead week. And had we not done that, I would have given away one of my stronger spring break weeks, right? So going in and doing that analysis ahead of time, do it now for your next year pricing is where you'll identify, okay, I know I'm going to have 3 strong weeks or I'm going to have 2 strong weeks. And then you start letting the owners know, hey, we've identified that we're only going to have 2 weeks this year. Owner education is going to be a revenue manager's like saving grace. And it's problematic and it's hard to do, especially if you've got a lot of owners. But as best as you can, go in and do some sort of generalized, like, look, we did the research. Here's what we're finding. Please don't call me and tell me that you have some friends in Texas that sometimes come. It's not going to do anything good, right? Like, let's follow the data, right? So identifying those strong markets and go ahead and pricing that appropriately. You know, 3/29 was always our biggest week, but I actually priced it about 30% lower than I did the 4/6. So
Awesome. That's super helpful. Bryant, do you want to tell us a little bit about your team's approach?
Yeah, so I was just taking down notes because we never thought to plug the zip codes into ChatGPT. We get a list from our CVB, puts together basically every year, our convention, visitors bureau, DMA, whatever you want to call it. But they put that together, and we, by subscribing, get that list of the key markets that are out for all the different spring breaks. So what we do is we compile all that. We have a Excel sheet that we put together every year, and then we basically take our data and figure out, you know, what are our booking windows for those different markets for each year. And so we'll plug that in, try to get an idea, like the people who are coming from St. Louis typically book further out for that longer drive to come down here than somebody who's from Birmingham or New Orleans or Baton Rouge. So like what we'll do is we break out basically how many people book within 30, how many book 30 to 60, 60 to 90, and then basically 90 plus is the way we look at it. And we'll start to target those people with our ads and stuff at, you know, the different iterations that we need to. We want to get out there a couple of weeks before they would be in their purchase window so that we're kind of in their heads and they're thinking about us and kind of looking at things. But similar to what Heather was saying, you know, we then compile all that stuff and figure out, like, here's the weeks that we actually have spring breaks that we can take advantage of this year, and here's the weeks that it's going to suck. And so what we do, similar to what Heather said, is we're going to talk to our owners pretty quick. We have a blog on our website that we put together from our revenue management team that kind of explains some of this stuff and goes through for our owners to try to be proactive with that information. We also host quarterly calls with them to talk through, like, hey, here's what our revenue management team's seeing. Here's how you need to look at this. Here's why your rate for this week's going to be real low and your rate for this week should be pretty decent. And so communicating that stuff out, targeting them with a good strategy early, making sure you're in front of them, making sure you have good rates when they're looking too. Like you can't go out there and start hammering them out with these things with your placeholder rates from 2 years ago that you plugged in at 30% ahead of what you sold for in the past year or something like that. So, that's kind of how we go through it. It's not a perfect strategy, but it works for us to make sure that we're just taking advantage of what we can on those tricky weeks, especially because, being able to tell somebody, hey, listen, market occupancy is 23% for this week, the last 2 years. You expecting like spring break to be everything that's in the month of March or the month of April is not reality. You've got to understand what a 75% week rate is going to be versus a 25% week, because it's not the same rate, or it shouldn't be the same rate. We should get fired if that's the case. So
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, awesome.
I think we haven't really touched on looking at the inquiries too. So look at when historically your inquiries for those weeks started coming in. That's kind of a big key for us too, is looking at historical inquiry pace as well as booking pace.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it kind of points to something for people listening. Bryant has a set of data and a CRM that he can leverage specifically for his portfolio. Heather has one for their guests. Your historical guests are going to be a guest profile for you that you can start with, and then start there, and then you can start to branch out into data sources that you don't have, or maybe like customer profiles that you aren't capturing yet. But your own data is a great place to start, especially if you've been collecting it for a couple of years. Josh, you want to let us know a little bit about how you guys are approaching spring break, how you figure that out, and what your kind
Yeah.
of plans are for it?
Yeah, early on, but not early enough, it seems like, as is always the case. When spring break shifted to 2 weeks, we kind of realized, okay, well, you got San Antonio coming the first week, and then you got Austin coming the second week. Those are our two biggest markets. We're drive to, so we know those are going to be 80% of what we do. And then we just kind of look back, and we realized pretty quickly that San Antonio market doesn't spend near what the Austin market spends. That second week of our spring break started pacing ahead faster and faster and faster than the first week did. There was a lot of lag time in the 210 zip codes. And so we, again, early on, but not early enough, lowered the rates of that first week, tried to get a little more competitive, saw and identified what houses maybe had an extra amenity or an extra fee we could take off to entice those people to book more, because it seems like the San Antonio market, for us, they're a lot more price conscious nowadays. The Austin market, they tend to travel to the larger homes or the more luxury homes. They're staying a little bit longer because the drive's a little bit longer. So they're going to be more, in tune to buy, the extra stuff that maybe those homes have, like beach gear or golf cart, whatever the amenity is you offer. But kind of making sure there was a distinction between rates rather than what we did before, where spring break is, it's 20% above our base rate, and that's what it's always going to be. Making sure we separated the two based on, the markets that were coming, the different weeks. And then, going into spring and summer, what we're doing is kind of applying the same process, because it seemed to work pretty well, especially when we started getting aggressive with rates as we got closer. We know Easter for us is a big time for, the San Antonio demographic. So making sure rates are more in line with what they're willing to spend. And then applying that to, every other weekend after that, kind of going back, seeing who traveled the most from our area, making sure prices are more in line with what they've historically spent. And then obviously in conjunction with some of the new stuff that we've done, again, with some fees and obviously some more data that we have available, just making better decisions on when we should, maybe change up our night minimums, open up maybe a discount for someone who wants to stay a little bit longer if they are. So picking apart and capitalizing on the, marketing advantages of, okay, well, 20% of this weekend is historically Austin coming down. Let's offer them 50% off if they want an extra night, to see if we can get them to, re-engage with the inventory here.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me. Like, I keep hearing this kind of thing coming up, which is digging into the data, fine-tuning it according to the customer profile. And, I think the last 4 or 5 years have really been in the industry, have been focused on OTA expansion. And now these marketing principles that were really popular Airbnb and Booking.com integrations are really coming back into the forefront for revenue managers. Those marketing fundamentals. If last year nobody mentioned those words. Rebecca, let us know a little bit about what how you guys plan for some of the spring breaks. I know you have a lot of markets, so
Yeah.
your part is interesting to me.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm really passionate about is starting the year off by looking at how did those homes finish, because I truly believe sometimes we can get ourselves in a really sticky situation, especially with spring, if you're already setting up those homes to fail, not even knowing it. So looking at the last year and going, okay, where did we win? Where did we lose? How did it, how are we going to keep this unit growing year over year? And then looking at those actual numbers, the actual booking rates for those time frame, and making sure that our prices are not astronomically higher than that. Like, I don't want to come in super, super high, especially on homes that we really struggled with last year. Making sure the seasonality is really tightened up, making sure that those minimums are in place, maybe even making some maximums. Not something that I do a lot, but if something is, and the algorithm is pricing them a little bit too high, not being afraid to kind of push that down. Like everyone else was saying, kind of looking at those booking windows, really taking them apart and not just look at the month, but look at the week, so that I know where do I need to start getting nervous. Because owners, they just forget that, everybody likes to book late, and it's easy to reference a sheet and go, well, actually, that's a heavy spring break week. Last year we were booking at 45 days out. We're at 90 days. We're good. So having that a system is really, really important. And I think, as we're seeing this over and over again, it's really, you've got to find a way to organize your data so that you can move through it fast enough, but also not miss anything, because we might miss the first quarter and second quarter, and all of a sudden we're at the end of August going, oh man, I've got to make up $25,000 in these last couple months of the year. And if you're in a beach market, that's really tough. Like, I'm not saying it's impossible, but fall is good, but it's not that great to kind of pick that up. So I think, again, just whether that's putting it on paper or having a system to be able to move through, whether you're in multiple markets or have, quite a few homes. I mean, anything can change really quickly, but I think having those systems in place are really important. Because long gone are the days of like feelings of revenue management. I mean, we question our feelings all the time, but like really leaning into the data to tell us where we need to be is important.
Yeah, I do think that that's a an element of why Q1 expectations are always a little higher than performance. Is I think there's it's the psychology element of revenue management, particularly the psychology element of entrepreneurship, which is when you go into the year, you're optimistic. You have to be, otherwise, how could you do business? But that means we're always more optimistic than by the time we get to Q3 and we're like, look, we're just be realistic, right? So finding the right balance so that you don't discourage your teams and yourself, but also, making sure the right expectations are in that Q1, early Q2 time period are pretty key. Let's go ahead and shift over to kind of what's going on through like kind of now through the rest of the spring, what you guys are doing, and then also what you're seeing for summer. So you can kind of choose. I know that spring is a lull for some of you, so you don't have to focus too much on it. But let's talk a little bit about how you guys are approaching pricing over the next couple months and what you're seeing for the summer, and if you are making changes to your strategy based on what's going on right now. And Rebecca, why don't we start with you and we'll kind of go back around the horn.
So because we did that exercise with a lot of our markets to kind of see where we are at, we're actually at a really interesting spot with a handful of our clients. Is we're actually have raised a little bit of our summer rates. And I know that I don't even like want to say it out loud, because I feel like the second I say it, like something will happen and I need to take it off, but not a huge, just enough. Looking at where the demand is, looking at where homes are pacing, where they're, where we've got the ability to maybe bump up 5 or 10% on the weekends. But again, that was because we were proactive. We're still coming in under market. And I think that's a really, really important thing to think about right now, is that some owners get so focused on, well, I want to see a comp set of the market. I want to see how the competitors are doing. Well, the competitors aren't going to pay your bills. Like, I'm here to make sure that you're making money, and we've got a plan in place. And so, like, please, I know someone else is putting, 3 times, and the reason you can see that rate is because it's not booked. So really getting more focused on internal growth, because you don't know what is that rate that you're looking at with rolled fees in it. Is that rate with a channel markup? Is it like, we're not really getting actual ADR to ADR when you're looking at market data. I'm sorry, you're not. I know there's different tools that kind of pull that apart, but it's just, I keep going back to, let's look at how you're doing. Like, how is your company doing? How is your growth going? How are your owners responding? Because there's some owners that are like, oh, do whatever you want. And then there's others that are very micromanaged, half the time I'm like, do you want to do my job? Well, I can like go find a hobby or something, because you seem like you know how to do it. And so I think that it's just finding that balance of really being able to put into words, what does success look like? And that's really tough sometimes, but I think, in my opinion, success is year-over-year growth for your company and for that specific unit. Yes, we want to keep an eye on what the market is doing. If I'm severely underpriced, then there's something going on. But with such increased supply in so many markets, it's a pretty broad thing that we can use in multiple different markets. And just the other thing is just really thinking outside the box. I think that's where we're seeing some people really succeed, is it's not just about ADR anymore. I know people are kind of touching on this, and it's the fees. It's, how are you getting other forms of revenue, like, that aren't just connected to the rent? Like, there's a lot of different pieces that you can kind of, put together to identify that idea of success if ADRs are coming down. So I could speak a whole lot of that, so I don't want to keep going, but yeah, there's just a lot to take into what's coming up.
Awesome. I'm going to clip out that quote. Competitors don't pay your bills. We'll post it all over there. It's pretty funny. I like it a lot. Bryant, why don't you let us know what your team is doing for the rest of spring and how you guys are thinking about summer?
Yeah, so we actually just recently made some pretty significant rate drops again for the remainder of the spring, just kind of as a last ditch effort to kind of get down to this year. Coming into the year, we dropped our minimums well below what we had in prior years, just to kind of really let things eat, see if we were going to get close to a new low minimum on some of them. And so we're just continuing to drop things as we continue to fill out the rest of the really as March and April. As we get into May, similar to what everybody else has kind of talked about here, May looks good. Part of that for us is because there was a adjustment to the festival that is in Gulf Shores this year that turned it into a more of a country music themed festival, which has been really good for demand for that time period because, shocker, the Southeast likes country music. And so we were able to take advantage of some of that and get some really good rates and really get things picked up pretty well. Memorial Day right now, we're just kind of keeping an eye on. We're such a small inventory relative to what a lot of people are looking at, that for us, it all is year over year. We don't care what the competitive set looks like for summer right now. I don't care what's happening for other people in my market. I care how I look year over year for my 1 bedrooms, my 2 bedrooms, my 3 bedrooms, my 4 bedrooms at specific buildings for specific time periods, weeks, weekends, things like that. And so we're monitoring that very closely. Right now, we're seeing that May is incredible, not just because of that, but because we had actually the volleyball tournament that was supposed to be out in California got brought back to our market again. So we had another little nice boost there. Unfortunately, because of the fires, but fortunately for us, we're able to pick up some extra nights there. June and July, again, not a ton to really know right now, other than things look pretty good. I mean, it's June we're feeling good about it. We're not, pumping things up through the roof right now. I mean, our ADR year over year is like within 2%. So like we're keeping it very close to last year right now. Our July, we pumped a little closer to 3 to 5% up for the most part, but we're trying to kind of keep it in that general ballpark to make sure that we're not slowing down too far to where we're going to have to, we dumped back down below last year's pacing. Now we're down in occupancy and we're dumping rates again. We're trying to make sure we don't get there by just really monitoring and making sure that adjustments, small adjustments now make a lot more positive headway than having to wait. And all of a sudden you got to fill in 45% of your stuff within 30 days. And that's just not good for anybody. It's not good for us. We're going to be taking owner calls and getting people losing their minds about it. And it's not good for the owners because they're looking at other companies and deciding whether we're the right people to be with. If they see that there's, 25 open nights for June as of May 15th or something like that. So
Are you extrapolating any of the performance from the spring, like the expectations of, are you extrapolating any of the performance from the spring into expectations into the summer?
we're sure hoping not, but we're kind of keeping a close eye on it. But I will tell you, we've had a couple straight springs where it's been like this, where this is 2 or 3 years where spring hasn't really been what we wanted it to be. And so we've had to dump those rates and dump those rates and dump those rates. And June and July have finished pretty good for the most part for the past couple of years. The big thing we saw this last year that really surprised us, and this is 2 straight years since we started actually work with our dynamic pricing system. June and July have gotten a lot closer in where they finish in rate the past couple of years than they had in the past. For us in the past, July was just, you just chalk it up. It's going to be 10-15% more on average ADR than June. That hasn't been the case. We've seen a little bit of a shift in demand. Last 2 weeks in June have been potentially as high demand as any week in July at this point, other than maybe the 4th of July week. So we're just kind of taking advantage of what we can see with those trends. We're not going to overreact to June and July yet, just because the spring was down, partially because we are such a late booking market in general, but also because we've, let's get through this kind of initial quarter where there's been a lot of changes in the economy. There's been a lot of changes in people's forecasts for the overall economy and what, GDP is going to look like and all that stuff. And unemployment doesn't look good. And, the credit card debt doesn't look good. There's a lot of those things that don't look good right now, but let's give it another month or two and see if the next couple of months we kind of stabilize, because we are just post-election. Election usually tanks our bookings for the year during the election for the most part anyway, because of uncertain economic expectations and things like that. So we're kind of holding tight. Like we're not going out there and bumping rates 15-20%. I can tell you that for the summer. Definitely not the case. So
yeah, makes a ton of sense. Heather, you want to let us know a little bit about how you're thinking about the rest of spring and summer here?
Yeah, so I think I decided this morning just to do the postmortem on spring. I think I've done what I can do, and she's dead. So defeatist if it is, but May, like everybody else is seeing, May looks decent. It looks decent from what I saw last year. Back to Bryant's point, what your competitor's doing is something that you should take into account, but you should weight it, right? Your year over year is going to matter a lot more. So when I'm looking at my inventory, I really do segment out my inventory and say, okay, who were my top performers? And for summer, I increased those rates by 6% year over year, but my bottom performers, I only did like 3%. So segment out those properties as best you can. I was actually able to do a lot of rate increases on, the bigger properties and more popular properties, from 6% to 10%. And their summers are pretty much booked up, which, is for summer. I'm going to be a lot more aggressive on summer because I know that's the absolute most demand I'm going to have. I'm going to feel more confident playing chicken with the market. I'm, going to be less aggressive on my discounts. And it's also because of the inventory that I have, property manager, right? You need to think about, do you have mixed inventory, or are you specifically, Gulf fronts with private pool, the ones that everybody's going to want, right? So, understanding your inventory and what you can do and segmenting that like that. I'm not as aggressive on May. For me, the shoulder seasons are an occupancy game, right? Where I'm leading with price on summer, right? So keeping all of those data points in mind, I'm doing really well versus what I did last year. Revenue wise, I'm up like 27% where I was this time last year. And that's same market, same house market. So that doesn't include any houses that I've added on. Another point that I think is important that maybe we haven't touched on is like, how long has that house been on your program? Is it established, right? You need at least 12 months for a house to be established. So active, available for rental for at least 12 months, sometimes 18. But you know, take those houses out and look at them kind of separately. If they've only been on your program for 6 months, you're going to have to do something different than what you do with one that's been on for 4 years.
Yeah, that's really good advice. You brought up two things that really, I think, for those people looking into their data and trying to wonder what's happening, really segmenting into same store sales cohorts, because that's going to give you a much better idea of what's going on in general. And then you can make a decision on your newer stuff in relation to that. And the other thing I think you mentioned a little bit is, and kind of like so far everyone who's spoken, but this is a struggle I think that this year is having, which is the summer pacing is pretty good, but then in the short term we have bad signals. So the balance for all the revenue managers is how much of the short term are we extrapolating into the long term? And in a way, it's kind of conflicting. So I think, I would encourage everyone to talk to other revenue managers and talk to other people about it. There's no silver bullet to that right now. That's something I think we're all kind of struggling with is, hey, if we're pacing well here, but pacing poorly here, what does that mean for the whole year, right? What does that mean for the overall strategy? Josh, you want to tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about summer and the rest of spring?
Yeah. So with shoulder season, sounds like Heather shares a similar shoulder season to us. It's just an occupancy game, just getting it filled, protecting Easter and all the other festivals that go on in the meantime, but really just getting heads in beds. And for summer, not too many changes there for us. We're kind of holding rates high on the weekends. And then similar to what Bryant said, your July used to be the biggest time, then you had June. Now they're kind of getting mixed, and with different things happening, we've gotten really aggressive on our weekdays. So not too many changes with summer, but we have gotten aggressive in some on some of the weekdays, and then just taking the inventory. We've had such a amenity surge, I call it, down here, where everybody last year started adding pools, started adding different things to the homes, that maybe that 3-bedroom private pool that you had, or that 4-bedroom private pool that you had, that was everyone's desire to book. There's so many of them now that no one's rushing to book them. So we're just kind of being really smart with those types of houses. So for us, it's just an occupancy game on the shoulder season, just see what we can get. We're taking a lot of data from last year, taking booked rates from last year, applying them to this year, seeing what we can do, maybe get a little bit more aggressive than what we did last year on those houses that did book. But then, just protecting summer as long as we can, and then just seeing when owners start squealing. So summer is pacing really good for us, or July especially. June especially is, but just not making too many rash decisions based on what we know is a short booking window right now.
Totally. Yeah, I think I heard a few things from Heather and a few things from Rebecca about that too, which is that shoulder season, being competitive there can be it's a way to make up for shortfalls. Like I think Heather
Yeah.
said, like, post-mortem on spring, it's dead. A lot of people are probably going to spin their wheels and use a lot of time and energy trying to change something they can't. What you can do is steal market share in May and in the fall and make up for those shortfalls in March. And that's something I would really recommend you do, is don't spin your wheels on something you can't. Like, what's the difference between $105 and $112 when you can drive occupancy in your shoulder season, right? And that goes to the name of the game, which I think is, if the markets are going to be more competitive right now, it's about market share. And that's kind of what you need to be thinking about, is how do you take market share if there's not enough for everyone to go around, right? Talking to other revenue managers about that, they probably won't, but hey, how can I take your market share? Okay,
John, I think that's really important to look at your far out pricing. I think that's the name of the game this year, is like, no matter what month you're looking at, like if I can get good bookings now, like Heather was saying for fall, let's rack them up. Like, I think that is where we as an industry have always kind of just thrown on that label of far out pricing, pop it up. But I think like pulling that back and getting that money in the bank when we can is really, really how you see a major difference between people who are really doing well this year and really are struggling, is getting those rates now, because we know what's going to happen. As time gets closer, they're going to go down. Like compression is not in really a lot of these markets anymore. So if I'm only 5% over what I got last year, heck yeah, I'll take it all day long. So I think that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the data I've looked at in the markets, it's a great point for May, is like people's rate right now in May is like where they started March, but we know we're way under where we started March, and they haven't done that work for May yet. And Heather mentioned it too. Heather's rate is right for the fall. The consumer is telling her where the demand is, right? You got to let the consumer tell you where the demand is, and you're not going to do that if you're not generating data points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we'll probably end it here. Really appreciate all your guys' time and your feedback and comments. Really wonderful. This will be posted on the Wheelhouse YouTube. So if you wanted to go back and listen to something or you wanted to share it with someone, please feel free to. We'll post it on LinkedIn and around after that. And, we'll be doing this again in a couple months. So hope this was valuable and really appreciate everyone coming.